Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. In this episode, I'm going to review the Conquest Monthly Update from February 2026 and the top 3 things I think you should be aware of from this update. I'm Paul Bethel. I'm an independent financial planning consultant based in Halifax, and I help advisors use Conquest with confidence. If this is of interest to you, stick around and I'll show you a few things. As you can see, I'm in my sample client scenario for Marc and Claire Levine. We can go to the upper left corner, 3 lines I refer to as the hamburger icon, and we can go into support resources, knowledge base, and view what's new for release 2. Here are the table of contents. There's quite a few items here, but as I mentioned, I'm just going to review the top 3 that I think you should be aware of, starting with Uninsurable Toggle. Then I'll discuss and review the U.S. Persons Toggle, and then we'll finish with SAM Insights, CPP, QPP, and OAS start dates. Let's head over to Conquest, and we'll start looking at Uninsurable Toggle. To find this toggle, we slide down to the family card here, and you can go in and choose either the client or the co-client, and we can go into the more details here with the pencil icon. And when you click in it and you slide all the way down to the bottom, you can see there's the toggle Uninsurable. Now the default is set always to no for both the client and co-client, but we can toggle it on to yes, and we can see the impact of that. Don't forget about your little help buttons here. When this toggle is used to determine if the individual qualifies for various insurance policies, setting the toggle to yes will remove insurance suggestions for this client within the planning and risk management modules. So let's say you've worked with Marc for a while. He's a client of yours. You are aware that his health took a turn and he is no longer insurable. And so we would come into the Conquest Planning for Marc and we would ensure that the toggle is set to uninsurable to improve the recommendations that Sam and yourself will make for this client. So let's see the impact of this toggle switched over to yes and how it impacts some of the recommendations within the risk management section. If we go into the insurance calculators, and as you can see here, we can add analysis for every single component for life, disability, and critical illness. Notice right away, we've got unmet needs highlighted in red for Marc right across the board. That's because he's no longer insurable. He's marked as uninsurable. But for Claire, everything's fine. We can see the proposed coverage and we can add the recommendations in for Claire. If we go into the options in the settings, we can see that it's taken out, right? The little controls for the term 10, the premium frequency and the premium amount are completely removed. Okay, so that's Sam's way of removing any risk of accidentally adding in a recommendation because Marc is uninsurable. So we see the unmet need here at 509,000. Okay, now if I click done and go back to Claire, we can go into her settings and we can see everything is here. New coverage needed, policy term 10, the premium frequency, and the amount that you would enter down here. We can specify custom amounts and we can adjust and we can do our insurance needs analysis for Claire with no problems at all. Okay. The other component of this is within risk management and we go to the insurance analysis. We'll also see the impact of this. I'm going to add a scenario and I'm going to choose, let's say disability insurance. If Marc becomes disabled, and I just leave the default settings there. It adds a scenario here in. It shows attention is required. But when we see reactive strategies, there's no proactive strategies to be able to add the insurance for Marc, right? Because he's no longer insurable. And we could just double check on the life insurance. If Marc passes away sooner, I'm just going to leave the defaults there. Action is required. There is a risk, but there's no ability to add the insurance on. As opposed for Claire, if we add the scenario for her, if Claire were to pass away, Claire passes away sooner. I'll leave the defaults, done. Attention is required. Here we go. We see the suggested insurance for Claire. Okay, so this just sets up some additional guardrails. It focuses Sam and Sam's ability to make appropriate suggestions based on your client scenario. It further contextualizes the recommendations Sam would make. Okay, so that's pretty much how it works. Insurance calculator, insurance analysis, and also if you're doing any planning work within a legacy goal, same thing would be applicable. When we look at adding in a strategy for any life insurance, you can see buy permanent life insurance. Here it is, take out $850,000 life insurance on Claire. Marc is unavailable in this recommendation because he's no longer insurable. So you can see there the impact of it for Claire, okay? If we were to accidentally add Marc in, what triggers here is a SAM insight. It gets highlighted and we can see Marc is uninsurable. So again, just reinforces the ability to keep things in line and make the best and most appropriate recommendations based on your client scenario. So that pretty much covers the uninsurable toggle. Let's head back to that family card because we're going to review next the next toggle, US citizen. And if I go back into the more details, as you may have noticed previously, right below uninsurable is the US person. Default again is set to no for both client and co-client. We can turn it on to yes. Again, don't forget about your help buttons here. When this is set to yes, SAM will deprioritize strategies relating to accounts that may cause issues for US persons. A US person is an individual who is a US citizen, US income tax resident, or US green card holder. So what this does, it limits the ability to open new accounts or make any recommendations into savings for Marc if he is a US citizen around a TFSA account, RESP accounts, and the FHSA accounts, as these are not best and appropriate for US persons living in Canada. Okay, so when I toggle them on to yes, and I go back here to the planning tab, and let's say I'm solving for my retirement goal, I'm going to move myself over here quickly. And if we were to add, say, an unscored strategy, save, let's see, increase savings to TFSA. Let's see if things will get triggered over here. And increase savings to TFSA. So let's say Marc, it defaults to 0. So what SAM is doing, it's applying the saving strategy to the TFSA for Claire, as you can see right there. If I were to add accidentally a savings for Marc, it should trigger a SAM insight. There it is. I don't know if you noticed the yellow ball highlighted. And if we scroll down, there it is, a US person. Marc is a US person. The following strategies create or use accounts that may lead to additional tax implications. You'll see TFSAs, RESPs listed there. So I think that's a nice feature. In my work with advisors in Atlantic Canada, I tend to come across this once or twice or at least half a dozen times in a given year. Depending on where you're located in Canada, you may see this more frequently than me. And so this just adds an additional layer to help further guide SAM in the work and recommendations SAM is making for your client scenario. And the final thing I want to make you aware of in this update is around the CPP, QPP, and OAS start dates. If we go into pensions, you'll notice there's a couple highlights right away. I've got the start date for Marc, CPP at retirement, and Claire at retirement. Notice it's highlighted in yellow. So if you've started a plan in previous years and after this update, you may notice when you go back into a plan, you might see some highlights because on occasion I've noticed the default start date is always retirement. And just want to show you here in my plan assumptions, I have Marc retiring at age 59 and Claire at the same time. And so that's why we've triggered the highlight in yellow, and we can just course correct that. We could go age 60 or 65, but just so you're aware, even though Marc is retiring at 59, the start date is retirement at 59, okay? So for CPP, sorry, the software still knows it's not going to start at 59, okay? So there are additional guardrails in place, even if you ignore that yellow highlight. I'll prove it here, going to the planning tab. We can view the retirement paycheck here at 59. Marc retires and Claire at the same time when she's 57. Notice the next ball over is when CPP starts. Marc age 60. So that just reinforces the idea that even though you may ignore this yellow highlight, you'll still be okay, but that's the reason for it. And if I were to change this to age 60 to fit within the guidelines, notice the highlight goes away. We can do the same for Claire. It's really up to you, but just something to be aware of. I notice I've gone into a few new plans, or I've gone into a few plans that I started the previous year or prior to this update, and there's been these little highlights popping up, and I was wondering what was going on, and I realized, okay, this must be a new enhancement within the software. So there it is, my friends. Those are the top 3 things I think you should be aware of. Hope you found this session useful and helpful. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. Please like this video, please subscribe, and if you like, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm quite active there. Find me over there and follow along. I'd love to connect with people on that side as well. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.